If you are a permanent makeup artist and you're a little bit confused with inorganic versus organic versus hybrid pigments, when to use what line, how they heal in the skin, then you're in the right place. This video is for you. I am Shay Danielle. I'm a permanent makeup artist for over 10 years. I'm an educator. I travel all around North America teaching students, and we've had over 95,000 students come through our online academy where we help you grow as artists, get better at your craft. I am going to keep things very simple in this video, and we're going to talk about the major differences between inorganic, organic, and hybrid pigments. We'll focus this video on brow pigments specifically. The more we understand the pigments that we're using, the choices that we're making, the more predictable our healed results become. So we understand what to expect out of that line. I'm going to pretend I'm like a grade 1 teacher here, really keeping it simple. So organic pigments, let's start there. I was trying to think of an analogy to make it really easy for you guys, and we're going to take it back to like coloring books, okay? So let's imagine our organic pigments are more like markers, right? So if we're coloring in a coloring book with markers, they saturate really quickly. If you're coloring too long in one spot, it will bleed right through the paper. Your paper starts to disintegrate. There's a lot of ink. It's very potent. That is our organic line. Organic pigments are tied to carbon black. That is what makes these colors vibrant and rich. This is what you see on body art. So lots of colorful body tattoos. They're all done with organic inks. Carbon black is what gives these inks the power to stay in the skin forever and ever and ever. The more carbon in a pigment, the longer it's going to last. And so when you wonder why some of these inks out there are turning gray over time and we're seeing people with blotchy blue gray eyebrows, that's carbon black. And that's because there's too much of it in the skin. I am not here to shit on any pigments or inks or lines or brands. I'm fully responsible for mistakes that I've made as an artist, and I want to prevent you guys from making the same mistakes. So carbon black is not the enemy. We love carbon black. We need carbon black in our pigments. Also, if you hear me throwing around pigments and inks throughout this video, they mean the exact same thing, so don't get confused. So if we're using an organic line that does contain carbon black, we need to keep in mind that we don't want to oversaturate the skin. We don't want to work the skin too much. We don't want to add too much of that ink into the skin, because what happens over time is all the other colors fade away, the light fastness, the sun exposure, the body metabolizes, but guess what doesn't fade away? It's the carbon black, right? So that's why we're left with that gray tone of an eyebrow. And then no matter how much orange we try to slap on top of it, it's not going to compete with that carbon black that's still in the skin, and it's not going anywhere. So removal is really our only option for those clients who have too much organic ink in their skin, their brows are too saturated and too gray. And even with removal and organic inks, it can take some time. It can be stubborn, it can be harder to get out of the skin. Saline doesn't usually do a heck of a lot for those really dark saturated brows. So here are some key pro tips to keep in mind when using organic inks. Number 1, you want to keep your saturation low. So if your clients keep saying, you know, darker, I want them dark, don't keep working on them until you get that really dark looking brow. It's actually going to oxidize and get darker during the healing process. So leave them lighter, keep it soft. Tip number 2, work with a light hand. That kind of coincides with the low saturation. You don't want to be a heavy-handed artist that's just pushing, not with organic inks. Tip number 3, you want to modify that pigment. So if it's a very cool tone pigment, you want to make sure you're adding warmth to it with a modifier. Tip number 4, you want to assess your client's skin type. So organic inks, I would say oilier skin clients do really well with organic inks because they metabolize it faster, right? Dry skin clients, be very careful, because they're just going to suck it right up. Okay, on to inorganic inks. So inorganic inks, this is how I learned permanent makeup, okay? We're going back more than 10 years now, probably 12 or 13 years. And that's all that was available to us PMU artists back then. And I will say that the inorganic inks have come a long way since then. But what happened before was they faded quickly. And when they faded, they turned like a pink, red, salmon color. And so the best we could do was keep putting brown on top of that. Clients would come back after a year, they had pink eyebrows, we would put brown on top, and it was just this ongoing cycle. No one really complained because it was happening to everyone. It was the only option. But the industry has evolved, and so have these pigment companies, and they have created much more stability within the inks that they are now selling. So inorganic is back, baby. It is back. It's also not fading out the same way that it used to. So what I really like about inorganic inks is that business-wise, having your clients fade out a little bit faster is not a bad thing. It means that they're coming in more frequently and you're making more money off of them. Not to be money hungry here, there's other pros as well. Because they're fading out, you as an artist have a lot more options as far as changing the shape, making them, bigger, bolder. Maybe they did a powder brow that's faded out and now they want to do hair strokes. We don't have that flexibility, that versatility when we're using something stronger like an organic ink. So going back to our coloring book analogy, our inorganic inks are going to be more like our pencil crayons, all right? So in order to color that page with markers, you're going to be able to get in and get out pretty quick, and your page is very colorful and bright, and you're done. Pencil crayons, it's a little bit of a slower process, right? You're taking your time, you're shading. To build up saturation, you're working a little bit harder in certain areas. It might take you twice the amount of time that it would with markers. So I feel like that pencil crayon analogy, it's a good one, hey? Yeah. Okay, don't want this video to be 45 minutes long. So we're gonna go with the pro tips for inorganic pigments. You need to oversaturate. So with inorganics, don't be afraid of saturation. If you're doing a nano stroke, pixelated, soft, airy nano stroke, you're probably not gonna get much out of your healed results if you're using the same technique that you would with an organic line with this inorganic pigment. It's just not going to pay off the same way. So that means you have to saturate your strokes a little bit more. You have to send your clients out of your studio being a little bit bolder, a little bit more of that scary stage, knowing that so much of that is coming out during the healing process, and it is more of a sheer healed result. It's like translucent. You can see the skin more than you can when you're using an organic ink. So saturation, high saturation is actually a good thing when using inorganics. Now, if we're wanting to achieve higher saturation, a great way to do that is actually up our needle size. So don't be afraid to work with larger needle configurations when you're working with inorganic inks. So if you're used to using that 1RL, you're a single needle gal, maybe consider popping up to like a 3-round liner or a 3-round shader. God forbid we were to get into even bigger needles. I like using like 7-round shaders oftentimes if I'm using an inorganic line, but don't be afraid. Yeah, bigger is better with inorganics. And my third tip with inorganics is to just pace yourself and take your time. It might be slower to get that ink into the skin. The molecule size of the ink is different than inorganic, so take that into account. And don't get frustrated. Don't overwork the skin. Just take your time, build it up as you need to. All right, this is where things get really juicy, and we're going to talk about hybrid inks because that is what we're all using. Most of us are using hybrid inks these days, so we need to talk more about those. So a hybrid ink line, you guys, I've got a whole bunch here that we're going to talk about. We've got the OMG set from Taryn Darling. We've got the Hanafi set that is just popping off. It's viral right now. And we have Old Faithful here that I have used for so many years, and that is our PermaBlend pigments. A hybrid line, a hybrid ink is a blend of inorganic and organic inks together. So in that bottle, you have a mixture. Amazing, right? You get the best of both worlds. You get the longevity of organic pigments. You get some of that soft sheerness from the inorganic inks. That's it, problem solved. We should just end the video right here. No, it's not that easy. So what we now need to determine, and this is where you have to do your homework, okay? This is artist's responsibility to know more about the lines that we're using. What is in that bottle, that one bottle? We're going to talk about CI numbers really quickly. If you don't know what a CI number is, if you haven't learned that yet, I need you to pause this video, go down into the link and click the other video there where I'm really teaching you about CI numbers, how to read them, how to understand them, what they mean to us artists. If you are familiar with CI numbers, let's keep going. So the CI numbers that are listed on the back of this hybrid bottle is going to tell us where it lands on the scale of inorganic versus organic. So in my little ADHD brain, I see an image, it's a scale, all right? We're gonna put a scale right here. On this side, we have inorganic. On this side, we have organic. And in the middle of the scale is hybrid. So we have to determine, a little math here, where does this bottle land on the scale? Is it leaning towards, what was this side? Organic. Does it lean towards the organic side or does it lean towards the inorganic side? And that right there is going to help me to determine what technique I'm going to use. how much saturation I need, if it's better suited for an oily skin client versus a dry skin client. Okay, so for example, we have OMG Bitchin' Brown. Amazing color, love it so much. In the CI list here, we can see we've got a combination of colors. We have iron oxide, like mineral, inorganic, and we have organic as well, a combination of the two. We don't actually have any carbon black in this though, so it's still considered a hybrid pigment, but I'm not going to put it towards the organic side, not quite as far anyways, because there isn't any carbon black at all in this, which is awesome. That means it's not going to fade out to that gray blobby color. However, this color right here, Cocoa Tease, it's actually a lighter color. It's lighter in the line. This one does contain a little bit of carbon black, and it's right towards the bottom of the list. So when they list CI numbers on the back of these bottles, it's in the order based on the amount that's in here. So I know for a fact there is a micro tiny amount of carbon black in here, and I've actually talked to Taryn about it, and she explains it beautifully, but she needs it. She needs that tiny little pop of it to make this color what it is. However, we can see that all of the other colors, most of the other colors in here are on the inorganic side. So generally speaking, this line for me sits more on the inorganic side of the scale. So I am going to treat this a little bit more like I would my inorganic, my straight inorganic pigments. Now we get into Hanafi, same thing. You're gonna have combinations of inorganic and organic inks inside these hybrid bottles. But I do believe almost all of these, I think all of them actually contain carbon black. So I have to take that into account. I know when I'm using this and when I'm using PermaBlend, okay, these have longevity. They have a lot of staying power in the skin, and that's based on the carbon black and the amounts of carbon black in here. So when I'm using these lines, I am modifying. I am keeping my saturation lighter and softer. I'm classifying these a little bit more towards that organic side of the scale. So back to our analogy with our coloring book. Think of hybrids as mixing and matching with your markers, your pencil crayons, your permanent markers, your watercolor markers, all these different tips, fine tip markers, thick markers, everything you could possibly want is in a hybrid line. You just get to decide how you use it. So I hope that didn't overwhelm you guys. I think that the industry has just evolved so much that we need to keep up to speed on what's available to us and how we use them, right? How we can get the most out of the inks and the choices that we're making for our clients. Again, if you're left with any confusion or uncertainty, we have another great video called Getting to Know Your Pigments, where I really dive deep into the CI numbers and how to understand what's inside that bottle. So check that video out. I will link the video down below for you guys. And if you want to try any of these amazing lines that I've been talking about in these videos, these are the lines that I use in my studio all the time. We've got them available on shopshaydanielle.com. I just want to finish this video off by saying one thing. There is no magical line out there that it fits, everybody. It's not a one size fits all situation because everybody is so different. Every client is so individual, and their skin and their needs, their requirements are different. What that means for artists is that you cannot just have one line. You can't. And that was the biggest mistake that I made early on in my younger years of being a permanent makeup artist. I just had one line and everybody, got that ink in their skin, and that's not how it works anymore. So I hope that you guys can understand that a little bit more, and you can know based on that client in front of you, do I need to grab for something more on the inorganic side, or do I want something a little bit more on the organic side for that client? So if you guys have more questions, I'm always available on Instagram. You guys can send me a DM, and feel free to check out our website. We've got lots of free lessons available for all of you artists, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.